Track Changes is designed to track what we change in a document. When you go to the Review ribbon, the Track Changes button is in the Tracking section, and I can turn it on and off by clicking on the button. If you're not in the Reviewing ribbon, it can be difficult to see whether Track Changes is on or off. So what we recommend is that you right-click on the status bar and make sure there's a tick against Track Changes. That way I can see that Track Changes is on, and I can also turn it on and off from the status bar without having to go to the ribbon. With Track Changes on, I can choose what I see when changes are made. So if I delete something, I can choose to see simple markup. And what that does is it highlights where changes are made in the document, and I can see what changes have been made by clicking on the bar on the left. This shows them in the document. I can click again and it will collapse the markup. Alternatively, if I want to see all of the changes in the document, I can say all markup. And now I can see the changes that have been made. Deletions have got a line through. Anything that's been added is underlined. If I want to see without having the deletions shown, no markup will show me what the document looks like with all of the changes accepted. And the other one is original, which shows me what the document looks like with all of the changes rejected. I can make all sorts of changes, so I could change the bold options, turn bold off. I can format to a different color. Let's make that blue. And I'm not seeing any of those changes because I'm showing the original. If I change it to either simple or all markup or the no markup, I'll see those changes made in here. Another way of viewing changes is to put the reviewing pane on. So if I click on the drop-down arrow, I can choose whereabouts I display it. I prefer to have it horizontal. I prefer to have it vertical rather than horizontal, but you can have it horizontal as well. What this does is it lists the changes that have been made to the document, so I can see who made the change and what change they've made. And I can scroll down and see the different changes. It is possible to print a list of changes. So when I go to File and Print, one of the options that I will have is to print the list of markups. So that will print me a list of everything that's been changed in the document. Back to my Track Changes area. I'm going to close the reviewing pane for now, and I've finished making the edits so I can turn off Track Changes. This might have multiple edits with different people, and I can go through and I can look at the different changes using previous and next, and then I can decide whether I want to keep those changes or remove them. So this is the addition of the new text. I could reject that one. Then I can go to the next one and I can choose whether to accept that one or not. If I want to accept everything, I can click on the drop down and accept all changes. And if I want to reject them, I can click on that and reject all changes. So the way that it marks the changes and who's made them is based on your username. So if I go to File and I go to Options, this is where I decide what my username is going to be. If you are signed into Office, then it will pick that detail up from your Office sign-in. And you can choose to always use those values rather than use the Office sign-in. So I could become Mickey Mouse. My initials are now MM. So now if I start making changes, I'll delete something there, and I go to the reviewing pane, I can now see that Mickey Mouse deleted are written. If you don't tick that box, back to options, if I untick that box, even though it still says Mickey Mouse, if I select something and delete it, it goes back to my username because that's who's signed in to Microsoft Office. So if you don't want to use your name when you're making changes, maybe you're doing it on behalf of the firm, then make sure on your options you set a username and initials, and you've also ticked always use these values. So I've got my revisions in here. I can choose what kind of markup I display. So on show markup, I can look only at insertions and deletions by removing the formatting. So that will only show me things that have been added or removed. I can look at just formatting changes by taking off insertions and deletions and just looking at the formatting. The other thing that I can do is I can look at specific people. So if I want to look at all of my different options, but only for Mickey Mouse, I can turn off changes made by me. So they are the options for what is displayed. The other thing that you can look at is what we call balloons. So under balloons, I've got show all revisions in balloons, and that will give me a side panel and it will show me the different changes. Now, the only thing I'm showing is Mickey Mouse, so I'm going to go back and show all reviewers, and now you can see the way it displays the different things that are added to my track changes. Balloons can be used for just formatting. So formatting in there, everything else will be displayed in line, or I can have everything displayed in line instead. Again, entirely up to you how you want to view it. So track changes can be really useful when multiple people are making revisions to a document because you can see who made the changes and what changes have been made. There are a number of questions that are asked about how track changes works. So can we not just turn off track changes? And then we can make changes and nobody would know about it. One of the features of track changes allows you to lock the tracking. So if I click on the drop down arrow, I can track changes just for me or for everyone, and I can lock the tracking, which requires a password. Ingeniously, I'm going to use the password. What happens then is the track changes is grayed out. I can't click on the status bar to stop the changes being tracked, and it permanently locks the track changes on. If you're going to be sending a document to other people, it's worth locking the track changes so they can't accidentally turn it off, particularly if it's on the status bar, or deliberately turn it off and make changes without you knowing about it. To unlock the changes, I can go back to lock tracking, put in the password, and that unlocks it for me to use in future. So I'm going to accept all of the changes in this document. And now I'm going to save my document with track changes turned off. So File and Save As. And I'm going to save this as version 2. What happens if you send a document and you forget to turn track changes on? For that, we can use the compare option. So I can compare this document to a different document. And if I've got different versions, I can go and use compare, and I can select the original document. So that would be my track changes, and compare it with my revised document, which is my version 2. So because I'm comparing two documents, I can label the differences with a name here. So I'm going to put my name in there and click OK. What I get now is the compared document in the middle. I've got my revision panel on the left-hand side, so I can see revisions. And then I can see the original on the top right and the revised on the bottom right. And again, it marks them as though they are tracked changes. So I can go through and I can skip between next and previous to look at the different changes, but they are all going to be marked with my name, because what I've done is I've said that this is the original and these changes are all marked as being me. So I can use compare to bring in two documents that didn't have track changes on, but because I have the two different versions, I can compare them. Another thing that you may want to do is you may want to go and save versions in a version history. How often have you made changes, saved them, and then wanted to go back to something and you didn't have something to go back to? So on File, under Info, I can turn on version history. For version history to work, you will need to make sure that the file is uploaded to a shared directory like OneDrive or SharePoint. What happens then is you will be able to use version history. So version history will also allow me options under compare. When I've saved different versions and I've got versions that are either marked as major or changes from the original, I will get additional documents options down here to allow me to compare the current version with one of my previous versions. That's the main track changes section. What I'm also going to look at is the options that you've got that are additional to the ones displayed on the ribbon. For that, we use the little more button in the bottom right hand side of tracking. If I click on the tracking options, I can change what I display in my track changes options. So I've got the same options that I had under my drop down. Balloons in markups, so I can change it to revisions or just showing comments and formatting. I can change the username from here, so this will open up this part of my Word options and allow me to change my username. There are also advanced options. So this is how we define what colours and what items are used for the different types of changing. So markups, I can see insertions are underlined and they are different colours by author. So I could change this and have all of these marked in a specific colour rather than different colours for the different authors. Deletions are strike through. So I can change that. I could make it hidden, colour only. I can make changes there. And the changed lines are on the outside border. But if I'd like to see those lines somewhere else, I can have them on the right hand side instead. Track changes moves. So if you've moved text from one place to another, there is a section where I can choose how I move things. So I've got double strike through and double underline, and they are both specific colours. But again, if I wanted this by author, I could choose that option at the top and it will add different colours for the different authors. On my table cell highlighting, so tables in the document, I've got the different changes marked there. And my format tracking, again, what sort of formatting do I want to track and what colour do I want it to be displayed with. So they're the main aspects of my track changes and my additional options. I'm going to just pop into a document that I have online. So this is the same document we were looking at before, only this one is stored in SharePoint. So when I go to my review ribbon and I go to my track changes, it works in exactly the same way. And I've turned track changes on and I can make my changes in here. As I was saying, if you've got a document stored online, compare will allow you to compare previous versions. So I can compare with a major version. So the last time I published something on a server. I can compare with the last version that's saved on the server, or I can choose a specific version. And if I go to File and I go to my Info, version history will allow me to see the versions that have been created with this document. So there is no previous version of this. This is the original, and it hasn't been updated in quite a while. But version history is very useful for being able to keep track of things, particularly if you do forget to turn track changes on. The other problem that we tend to run into is forgetting to turn track changes off, or accepting and rejecting the changes when we're working in a document. So I think there have been some rather notable occasions where people have sent documents out with changes still visible under track changes. To avoid that, we would always recommend, first of all, checking on the review pane. And if you put the review pane on, you should be able to see any changes that have been made to the document. The other thing that we would recommend is before you send a document, go to File and Info and use the Document Inspector. So this can check for various issues. We've got Compatibility Checker, which will check whether the features in this document are compatible with previous versions of Word. I think a lot of people now are on 365, but there are still companies that might be on Office 2010 or an earlier version still. So this will make sure that your document looks right for those people. We have an accessibility checker, which can check the document to look for content that might be difficult to read, or images where you don't have alternate text added. But the one that we're interested in is Inspect the Document. This looks for hidden changes in a document. It will require you to save the file first, and these are what you can check for. So the main one that we would look for if we are using track changes is comments, revisions, and versions. So it will check the document to make sure there are no outstanding track changes, that any comments are removed, and everything is as it should be. We can also check for hidden data. So what I mean by that, if I close this and go to File and to Info, on the right hand side are document properties. So this includes the author's name and who last modified the document. And in fact, there's quite a lot more information if I click Show All Properties. So this is information that goes with the document. If you send it outside your company, it will give the author name and the last modified name to whoever receives it. So by using the Document Inspector, I can check for any hidden or personal data in the document. It will also check for other information contained in there, and we can also check for ink. So ink is where if you have a touch screen or you have a touchpad, you can draw directly on a document. It can check for all sorts of other things. I'm going to check for all of those and click Inspect. It can take a while depending on how large the document is, but anything that it finds will have an exclamation mark on the left-hand side, and anything it's happy with will have a tick. So I've got headers and footers and watermarks that were found. I've got no invisible content, but I do have XML data. I also have personal information, author, related dates, document properties, pictures that have been cropped that can be uncropped if you don't remove that, and also revision marks. Whilst this will not allow me to see what those actually are, I can click Remove All and it will remove those from the document. So I can go and remove everything and then reinspect. There's still some document information. I can try removing it again. It says it was successfully removed, and then I'm going to click Close and go back to my document. So now what I'm seeing in the revision pane is there is nothing showing. So it's got rid of any outstanding track changes. It's left my document the way it should be before I send it out. If you're not sure what revisions will be removed, then cancel the Document Inspector, turn on Reviewing Pane, and you can have a look at the revisions in there. And if I go to my File and Info again, it's removed the author information and the last modified information. I don't think that it's actually removed the cropped image data. So I'm going to reinspect it again and just check. I think it's having yes, it's having a problem doing that. So what that means is somewhere in my document, I've cropped an image and it's no longer showing the full image, but the full image is available underneath. Now, if I was to hazard a guess, I would say it is probably this. And I can probably make that bigger to be able to see the text underneath. But Document Inspector will not show you the problems. All it will do is tell you the problems exist. But there's nothing worse than sending out a document that's actually on something like version 3, but there are still track changes. And anybody that knows about track changes would be able to come in and have a look at what's been changed. So making sure you've accepted or rejected all of the changes in advance. And the final thing that I'm going to look at is printing the document with changes. So I'm just going to replace some of these to put some changes in. Let's change the color of that and of this one as well. So when I go to File and Print, we saw earlier that we can print just a list of the changes, and all that will be is your reviewing pane details. On print, I can choose whether I'm going to print markup or not. So markup is the list of changes. To turn it off, I can untick the tick and I will then see no markup displayed, and I would just see the document as it would be if I had accepted all of the track changes. Turning it back on, I can now see what's been removed, and I can see where those changes have been made, because it will also print the line in the left-hand side of the margin. So that's track changes. We can turn it on and we can make changes. We can change the names of the track changes marks that we leave. So if we are doing it on behalf of someone else, then we can do that on our review ribbon. If I go to more options, change username, but making sure that you've ticked the box in here. Unticked, it will always use your Office sign-in. So I can make those changes, and then I can change back to my usual username and make changes as myself. And we've seen how we can go through next and previous and accept and reject changes. Don't forget, if you do want to make sure that people can't accidentally turn off track changes, you will need to lock the tracking and add a password. There is another way of doing that in a document, which is the restrict editing. So this allows you to do something very similar. So under editing restrictions, I can tick the box and I can say that only tracked changes in the document. Then when I start enforcing the protection, I can add a password here as well. Editing restrictions also allow you to restrict it to just adding comments. We can restrict editing to read only, so no changes are allowed in the document at all. Or if we've used form elements, which we may well cover in one of the future webinars, we can restrict it to just filling in forms. The other thing that is quite useful in here, particularly if you have style set up, is limiting formatting to a selection of styles. So allowing you to say what different styles can be used in a document. And again, that's something that we're going to be covering in a future webinar. So if you're keen on ensuring that your documents always maintain the same look and feel, and that you know of any changes that are made to a document, you can use the restrict editing in the same way that you would use track changes, and it will ask you to add a password when you start enforcing those changes. And that's it for today's session. Rather a short session, but track changes is a relatively straightforward topic. So hopefully you found the session useful. Let us know what you think of it. Let us know if there are any other topics that you would like to cover in future, whether it's Word or one of the other Office applications, or maybe it's something totally different. Thank you for your time. Hopefully you had a lot of information in the session.